So let's give Mike a big round of applause here.
Thank you.
All right.
As I was just telling, go ahead. As I was just telling George, I know about as much about aviation as I do about nuclear power. If you guys were here for the presentation several months back on Hyperion power, the panel was like nuclear physicists and whatnot. So I'm hoping you guys, the engineers and the aviation folks in the room will keep asking some questions. I'm going to ask some very basic questions, but first let me introduce the other two panelists. Mike Moore, the most important thing you need to know for this panel is he has 4,000 hours of flight instructor training in helicopters. So I guess we could talk about whether we can apply this to helicopters. And Bob Williams, he has 30 years of experience with United Airlines and the Air Force. So another Air Force veteran on the panel, and he's also an entrepreneur and he's run a bunch of businesses. The first question I want to ask you guys is, and you guys can comment on what you think about the company, is what drove you to do this? I know you're also working with trying to come up with synthetic fuels for jets, but what's making you spend all your working life and most of your recreational life on this project?
Yeah,
I hear your wife's laughing back there, right?
Somebody's laughing back there. Yeah.
It's sleeping time.
Maybe I should let Diana answer this. Is that on still? I don't think it is.
There you
There
go.
we go. As I mentioned, the flight experience, the getting into that Cessna 172 that's 30 or 40 years old is what flying today is like. And we would like to see that, of course, be something that's exciting, new, and high technology. Many of you grew up in the same era as the panelists, all of us up here, you know, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, etc. And aerospace was exciting. I mean, every time you turned on the TV, there was the next generation of rocket launch. There was a new Century Series fighter. There was a new business jet or airliner. And I look back and where today is that adventure in aerospace? You know, if the average age of the Cessna 172 is some 40 years old, and it's something close to that for business jets, I think. Maybe not quite as old. You know, what happened to our industry? You know, what happened 30, 40 years ago? And it's our aim to try to reinitiate some of that excitement, adventure, you know, with current technology and the current experience.
I can only underscore that. I've been flying since I was 3 years old, and one of the things I've learned from a lot of very good people are to put things back, and that's what we're doing, to put a little bit back into aviation. As George mentioned, we're going to do a game changer with the electric conversion, and really interesting working with George because he's got some things at the opposite end of the spectrum. They're going to roll everybody's socks up and down too, and it's just a lot of fun.
Bob, would you like to add to your comment on what you think about this project so far?
Well, obviously it's fantastic. The more I saw about that, I like the one moving part versus the 400 parts. But I think their psyche is kind of similar to mine in the sense that they're inventors and they want to solve problems. I'm a compulsive problem solver. I really relate to that, and I think that's a lot of their drive too.
Thank you, Bob.
I'm also a compulsive problem solver, but I like to sum things up in a single word, and aviation is simply addictive. It's like heroin. It costs as much, and you can never shake it.
Almost like golf.
So can you help Mike? He wants to get his he wants to get his helicopter fitted with an electric system. How hard is that problem going to be?
It's very interesting because one of the conversations we had at Oshkosh, they've got a Hughes 300 that's fully converted. They're doing the ground tests on right now. It's very similar to our project, and we're paralleling it. We're going to, as one of the companies I mentioned, we're going to collaborate with on some FAA certification issues. But that airplane, that helicopter, that flying machine was physically sitting at Oshkosh going through ground tests, and they had suspended their ground test to bring it. But it's the 300 series, Schweitzer or Hughes or whatever you want to call it. So it's right around the corner.
So not as crazy as it sounds. Now, one thing you haven't talked about, you did talk about reducing the cost per hour and the efficiencies, but what about the cost in general? Okay, I have a Cessna 172. In a couple of years, I want to get this product. What am I looking at?
Well, much like the infrastructure industry, the application of alternative energy in solar cells, batteries, wind, etc., we're seeing the costs of the batteries and the technology parts and pieces radically be reduced over the last year or 2 years, and we expect in the next 2 to 3 years those costs to continue to drop. You see, $2 predicted by some per watt, maybe $1 or less in the next 3 to 5 years. $6 to $7 isn't uncommon today. So as we look forward, those who are predicting the cost of these alternative energy technologies, we believe will have the same impact as it applies to aviation and benefit our purchasers, the propulsion system purchasers. What is it really going to mean? The motor is much, much less expensive, an order of magnitude 2, maybe 3. Battery costs are relatively expensive today, but again, as Charlie pointed out, dropping significantly, even some 20-25% within the last year. So while today I'm a little hesitant to give you a specific number, it does appear that the overall experience will be much less in terms of operating costs and the same or less in terms of the equivalent internal combustion airplane today.
Thank you.
One quick comment. In the short term, our target is if somebody goes in for an overhaul on their internal combustion engine and replace it, we want to be able to replace for the same cost. That's a short-term goal that we have right now, so that, if you're going to have to get an overhaul, come in and convert to electric.
Now, when we talk about alternative technologies, whether it's solar, electric, battery technology, there are a lot of federal incentives and state incentives for these types of projects. Are you looking, if you have a lobbyist that you have a lot of people sponsoring you, I mean, when you're trying to do a game-changing technology, you probably need a little help.
Yeah. We took on this project without grants or government incentives in mind. I think there's some challenges ahead in terms of the economy and probably the political landscape and so forth isn't going to be highly advantageous to maybe the grants and things that were in place a few years ago or even today. Unfortunately, general aviation is not on the top of the list for many of our politicians. We looked into this, Mike, and actually we found out that the government definition of vehicle did not include airplane. So, yeah, believe it or not. So all of these grants and incentives and the various politicians standing up saying, we're incentivizing this group or that group that's developing whatever it is, they neglected to include in the definition of vehicle an airplane. So we're doing it literally with our partners and our friends and without government support.
Now, obviously, you have Cessna, you have a lot of other sponsors, quite a few on there. Tell me a little bit about what those relationships are like. I noticed Clean Launch on there, a local clean tech incubator. Are they involved in terms of helping you promote it, investing, maybe having a branded model that will help get this off the ground?
The answer is just about exactly what you asked. That depending on who the sponsor is or who the collaboration we have is, they provide everything from funding, through engineering collaboration, through promoting, through advertising, engineering help. So it runs the full spectrum depending on who they are. And the other thing, I just would underscore what George said. We are absolutely an independent company, and we're doing the project. It's funded privately, and we're charging ahead. We would love to see government funding. The reverse of it is it's not a parameter of ours. It's probably something we take pride in that we aren't using government funds right now, which is very unusual in 2010. But I won't get off on that tangent.
Okay. Bob and Mike, if you were on their advisory council, what things would you be asking right now?
Actually, one of the things I was thinking about when I was first reading about it is the purpose of a hybrid. I mean, generally, the idea of going all electric is to get away from, like you said, liquid fuels and some other things. And it didn't dawn on me until you were talking about it, is the power required for cruise flight is substantially less. So you're able to use what is essentially a finite resource for the takeoff phase, but then you don't need that much power for the rest of your flight. It gives you a chance, whether you're using any type of auxiliary power unit, whether it's running on liquid fuel or some future fuel of some sort, to recharge the batteries in flight, because you can add a little more than you're taking away. The sun recovering from vortex and the descent, which is, I mean, if you're not recovering from the descent, I'm going to have to take you out in the parking lot. But, that was actually, I think the missing piece for me was the fact that it takes so much power to get off the ground. And, I'm a helicopter guy, so once you pull it up into a hover, you're just all about horsepower. We're like the muscle car guys of the aviation industry, and if there's an engine twice as big laying around, somebody will figure out how to stick it in that helicopter, and then, there's tail rotor issues, but we'll solve that because we want the power. And I think for an airplane, the way you're going with it, with the quiet, I mean, she went for a sailplane ride. The first time I went for a sailplane ride, I was practically bored. Nobody was shaking me. I couldn't hear this whumping in my helmet. I was like, what is this? It's like sitting on a couch. And I think bringing that is probably as valuable as an experience now as the smell of avgas was when we were kids.
That was a thought I was thinking about a little while ago, was to just hopefully a little humor, was that it's going to get so quiet, there'll be no air shows. So you're going to have a loudspeaker in every plane, just like a Harley. Why do Harleys make the sound? So they're going to have to turn on an engine sound while they go by, just like the smoke coming out like it was on fire.
With the quiet, you'll be able to hear the announcer bragging about your skill and cunning.
Well, along those same lines, as a novice aviation person now, if you're coming in to a general aviation airport with one of these planes, will the people in the tower know you have a specific type of, you're coming in with electric? I mean, in other words, you're going to have the infrastructure and the knowledge of what types of planes are coming in. Oh, this one's with synth fuel. This one's with electric motor.
I'll give you just a real quick, easy answer. The tower can't hear you anyway, so you're still going to be a Cessna 4.5 X-ray on final, and the speeds are going to be the same, performance can be the same. The thing I thought was kind of humorous when I was watching the motor glider is that I bet you we're going to start getting a lot of calls about potential airplane crashes, because this airplane just came over my house and his motor was dead, making no noise.
Now, I'm sure you guys have thought, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, noise around the airport communities is a big deal.
That's my question.
It's a big deal. Around Centennial, right now, it's highly sensitive, the noise issue. In Europe, it's a profound issue. So whether it's emissions, pollution, or noise, we can significantly benefit the community relations with the aviation experience.
So if I'm the general manager of a general aviation airport, I can use you guys to help add another runway into our airport, because we got all these people. I've lived in Naples, Florida for a number of years, and there was always somebody who bought a home near the airport and started complaining to the city council and the airport authority that all this noise, when of course they should have known where they were when they bought the house.
That's right.
So that's a good branding opportunity for you then. It's a problem it's not even the original problem you were trying to solve.
That's right. And remember, I love the noise of aviation. We call it the sound of freedom and things like that. But really, we're talking about the training airplane, the point of entry, the new experience. Technology today is part of the new culture, if you will. Our kids won't have the same experience that we all had. So, yeah, maybe some of us will miss the sound of the roaring jet at the air show, but the new generation will look at the majesty of the the vertical climb and the aerobatics and not having the noise, as opposed to our experience with our generation. It's a transformation. It's a cultural shift. It's not a bad thing. It's just part of what we believe the future is.
It's going to be an iPhone app. You're going to just press which sound you want your plane to make, and you just put it on a speaker, and it's going to make some little tone come up.
Well, everybody listening and looking, start turning their own sound.
Now, Ford's going to be in town tomorrow and on Wednesday. I think they're going to be in Boulder on Wednesday and in Denver Boulder on Tuesday and in Denver on Wednesday, doing test drives of a all-electric Ford Focus. Popularity of electric vehicles, is that going to help your cause, even though it's not directly related? As long as we keep pushing there, it's going to help you guys too? Do you think that's going to work?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have really seen a shift, I think, in interest in hybrid and electric vehicles. Toyota, of course, we've seen the Nissan Leaf, the Ford Fusion, hybrid, and the emerging electric vehicles. FedEx has electric delivery trucks now that they're introducing. There's a shift going on across America. And I think if we didn't do what we're doing, others certainly would in time. So it is the future. Hopefully those that are well prepared for it will be a part of introducing it. And of course that's our aim with the Cessna 172. But as a follow-on, I think the question that many people will ask is, well, is there an infrastructure to support my electric airplane? Now, what happens when I, complete my flight? How is it that I recharge my plane? Does the extension cord run out from the lobby, or how do I do this? And clearly, that's as important a question to the flying experience, perhaps in terms of the airport environment and some of the things that we'll be working with the city and the state, and of course across the country, to provide the infrastructure to support electric vehicles, not just ground vehicles, plug-in hybrids and so forth, but of course at the airport, the plug-in airplanes.
So you have some opportunities for fixed base operators and service providers, people who need some special training to work on these craft.
Exactly.
Yeah, an interesting thought I had on that issue was that you're far better off because there's several thousand, let's say 15,000 airports. I mean, little bitty ones, Erie Air Park and everything. But that's it. I mean, the airplane always goes to an airport. And so how much quicker could you run out the cords, run out a little truck, whatever, as opposed to the automobile industry, who's going to have hundreds of thousands. Their biggest problem is now the infrastructure. So aren't we better off as pilots, as electric pilots, getting that question answered as opposed to what the car manufacturers are going to face?
That's right. Exactly.
Mike.
A lot of my background is actually airports, and one of the things that is happening in airports now is, if you've ever seen a picture of one at night, there's tons of lights. They're primarily incandescent, and the energy they use is enormous. Companies like ADB have come out with a lot of LED lighting systems, and unfortunately the power, it starts essentially as a high power system, and you plug in a little power transformer and run a little LED. So it's kind of like charging your phone. You're going from an enormous voltage AC to some piddly little DC voltage. If we converted all the incandescent bulbs to LEDs, there'd be enough leftover power to power 43,000 Cessna 172s running on electricity. There's an enormous waste of electricity and electrical capacity at our airports to just power the lights on a taxiway. You could probably unplug a taxiway light and plug an airplane in and charge it in an hour. Literally, there's so much voltage sitting in the pavement that you just need access to it. I mean, an outlet in the base of every taxiway light would solve your problem charging airplanes.
Now you guys are banking on the future, hoping that technology will keep pushing, which is kind of ironic considering that you're talking about something that hasn't changed in 40 years, right? But now you're betting on the future. And we have high performance, we have lower fuel consumption, all these great things. What are some of the biggest challenges you have in getting this plane going? What are some of the stumbling blocks and some of the things that the trade-offs?
Well, a real simple answer is technology advancing rapidly enough. The challenge we face today is weight and cost. And we're confident that weight's going to come down and cost is going to come down. The engineering equation is relatively straightforward, simple to solve. The flight test environment is very straightforward, so I would say weight and cost would be my answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the other piece of it is certification. The FAA, of course, provides the safety for all of our flight experience. That's the job they have to protect the public, if you will. And electric has never been done before as a primary propulsion system on an airplane. So there is not a book that the FAA can pull off the shelf and say, okay, well, if you just follow step 2, 3, 4, and 5, then we'll be happy to stamp your airplane certified and off you can go. Literally, Charlie and the engineering team, we have an attorney that specializes in this as well, will help work together with the FAA to write the rules that today literally do not exist. So while we don't see it as an insurmountable issue, rather we see it as a cooperative, collaborative effort to get together with the FAA, is something that hasn't been done before. And so, you know, it's perhaps, I guess, part of the adventure of this program is working together with the regulatory authority and helping develop the certification plan.
And getting back to how you're designing these planes so that you can keep putting newer battery technology, it's kind of like a computer, right? You just keep putting in a new hard drive. You can set it up so that you don't have to get rid of the whole thing, just replace that one part.
That's right.
Just a quick point along those lines. The motor weighs 48 pounds now. If we pick up 10 or 15%, we're going to pick up 4, 5, 6 pounds. Batteries, if we pick up 10 or 15%, we're 75 to 100 pounds. So I mean, the airframe motor combination, instrumentation will basically stay the same because they're not gigantic advantages. The battery technology and getting the voltage to the motor is where it's going to come from.
One thing that occurred to me when you were talking about how old these planes are, how long they've been in service, is you're going to be able to extend the life of a lot of these planes, right?
We will extend the life a lot, and you might speculate with some of our collaboration that you might see some new airplanes coming out.
I would think
Same
so.
Technology.
That's not a quote.
That's speculation.
It's merely speculation.
So you're not stopping at the Cessna 172. There's going to be Bob has a comment.
If I could expand on that question, just because I was going to ask that, I want to go a little further. If, let's say you had 100 all on the Cessnas, and they're all working, you are now certified. Okay, I'm going past because I know you're in the R&D and development stage. But let's say that they're really working, it's looking real good, and you're getting contracts, new airplanes, everything. My question is this, have y'all extrapolated to any inherent negative, i.e., well, this Cessna, I tell you, it rattles like crazy. We're getting exhaust fumes. I can't get it too hot. That's a bad example, but I'm saying, is there any inherent thing that y'all think might be a negative really when they're functioning? I can't think of any. In other words, I see this thing as almost foolproof. And now I'm not talking about, let's say it all works. Is there anything that you...
I'll pass it over to George, but the question was asked earlier about the environmental comfort levels of the airplane. That I think is going to be a challenge, is correctly heating and air conditioning.
Yeah, but it has heat now, it has air conditioning.
Yeah, no, I would, you look at gear extension retraction, electric flaps, the larger, more complex airplanes are pressurized, so there are a number of additional auxiliary items that draw power. Oh, yeah, and so for a more complex airplane, the challenge is greater than for a relatively simple, unpressurized Cessna 172.
Mike has a
like
comment. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Bob.
like everybody getting used to Prius, and they love it, then all the Cessna people, just the Cessnas, probably will just simply love it. That's a question.
That's correct.
Yeah, they're gonna love it. It's gonna be the best thing. The one thing I identified as a downside, and this is from a helicopter's point of view, where you can't fill all the seats and you can't fill a helicopter with fuel and go anywhere. So I rely on the fact that the longer you run it, the lighter it gets. And there comes a point where you can perform magic with an airplane just before it runs out of gas because it doesn't weigh anything. But a hybrid won't change weight. It's in the example you're using, the CG won't change, which isn't going to be a big thing, but it doesn't get lighter over time. And that was about the only thing I could think of that might be a hindrance to someone like me who tends to start out planning on it weighing less later.
That is an absolutely outstanding observation, that our airplane will not change by weight or CG from the time it takes off until the time it lands. But all of our computations are done on energy available, so we don't need the lighter weight to get the longer range. We've got the horsepower available, we've got the electricity available to power it for the same length of flight. So it's, yeah, that it is a plus in our estimation, but the observation is exactly correct. In today's current technology airplanes, the longer you fly, the more efficient or the faster it'll go because it's lighter.
We have about 15 minutes left. More questions from the audience, right here. Homer.
Think about refueling, it's not 50 gallons of gas, now you gotta charge all those batteries. How long is that gonna take? Is that a downside?
Well, it depends, of course, if you're a high ops tempo training organization or if you're a weekend recreational flyer. Of course, if you're only flying once or twice a week, it will be a non-issue for you. Today, with the current battery technology, it's about 1 hour to recharge for 1 hour of flight. And it's not 100% recharge, it's somewhere between 80 and 95%. Again, not much different than what you may be reading with the various plug-in hybrids and so forth. The technologists tell us that the batteries will go from what's called a 5C rating, 10, maybe upwards of 20C, which is kind of the volume of acceptance of a charge or discharge, depending on the battery, what you might be using it for. And that will allow for that equivalent increase in the rate of charging. In other words, right now it's an hour for an hour. They tell us that will be something like 15 minutes to recharge for an hour of flight as we get to that 20C battery rating. So just like as Charlie mentioned earlier in the presentation, as we look into the future, 3 to 5 years from now, we really don't see the recharge of the battery as a limiting factor to the aviation experience. You'll pull up to an FBO, fixed-based operator, you go in, work with your flight plan, maybe get a bite to eat, come back out, and the airplane will be ready to go just as you were, if you were today, filling it with avgas.
Now, I doubt this will happen, but is there really any technological reason why you couldn't have the same kind of battery technology in your car? It's like, oh, I forgot to charge my plane, I'll just yank it out of my Jeep and stick it in the plane.
Well, again, perhaps some speculation on whether there's uniformity in chargers or not, but in theory, something like that's possible, yes. Sorry.
Another question.
One other observation on that, the battery packs are replaceable also. So in a high volume operation, if you want to turn the airplane fast, you can change your batteries very, very rapidly. Open up the column, open up and change the batteries and put a new set in. So in a training environment, we envision that happening a fair amount too.
So I envision a James Bond movie where the bad guy yanks all the batteries out before he jumps out in the parachute. Somebody had a question over here.
I had a quick answer for that.
We have a microphone here if you want to come up and talk so Steve can get you on camera.
Okay, while they're doing that, I had a quick answer too. I was just reading today Gasker, the Israeli guy. He has, you drive over a little station, and this is the station replacement, and literally automatically it drops the battery out and puts a new one in about 30 seconds to a minute. But anyway, battery replacement you talked about. It was just another great answer.
I've been watching that one gentleman back there with a question for half an hour, I think.
Variable pitch prop, what are you going to run the prop on now that the hydraulics are not necessarily there? It's normally hydraulics that run that variable pitch prop. And the other question is about the APU. What kind of horsepower is that APU going to have, and where are you going to put it?
The variable pitch prop typically runs, as you know, on a hydraulic, an oil or hydraulic fluid. Electric props are available now, and of course we will transition with an all-electric airplane to the electric variable pitch prop. Second question was the APU, and we have a couple of high technology opportunities with the APU. One we're looking at is a very small gas turbine. The other is a very high compression new technology diesel. Both would use jet fuel or heavy fuel, diesel or jet fuel. So in either case, the so-called aviation leaded gasoline issue would be set aside. Some of you who are aviators know that avgas is in some dispute because it's both leaded and a very low production, low priority item. So there's some concern amongst aviators that the fuel won't be available for too many more years. And one of our approaches to help address that is, of course, the alternative fuel that we've been looking at as a company. But secondly, to make sure that the auxiliary power unit doesn't use avgas as its source of energy, but rather a heavy fuel, a diesel or jet fuel.
What's the horsepower on?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. There's some trade studies going on amongst the engineers, but anywhere between 15 and 40 horsepower.
I was going to raise the same question, how much you've thought about the implication of this for third world countries. Already, New Guinea, much of Africa, fuel is already not available at all. We have to stop flying our Cessnas. And so it's no longer a sport. I mean, it's the actual survival of the Congo. Picture fuel now at $12 to $16 a gallon.
Cut the wire. Must be a naval aviator there. You caught the wire. Yeah, I cannot, thank you so much. The austere locations that the Mission Aviation Fellowship flies, the aviators in Canada, throughout the western U.S., Australia, Alaska, this is a tremendous opportunity to expand aviation and the role that its service plays in these locations. We do not rely on the fuel infrastructure. Solar panels, plug it in and go fly. And that is complemented by a very, very robust, low maintenance system. You don't, oftentimes the internal combustion engine needs a little tweaking, needs a little bit of work, and especially the older airplanes, they're kind of constantly needing some tender loving care. The electric motor is extremely robust. And so the austere location operations, as you mentioned, the ranchers, the aviators in Canada and Alaska that rely on their airplanes for transportation into town, this provides them the independence from the fossil fuel infrastructure and a very robust capability.
Hi, this is just kind of a general entrepreneur question. I mean, you guys are obviously being tremendous innovators with what you're doing, but it also seems like you're being very open about the technologies that you're using. And I was just wondering what your strategy is for protecting your intellectual property and, preserving your place in the market, really.
Yeah, we're locking the door here, so nobody leaves the room. Exactly. Aerospace is unique. I'll let Charlie answer this. He tells the story much better than I do, but aerospace doesn't use patent protection like the IT industry or technology, software, etc., communications. We take a little bit different approach, and I'll let Charlie address that, but we use contracts more to do that.
And that's a very difficult question to answer. A very simple answer is Cessna only has one patent, one in 80 some odd years of business, and I don't even know what that was. I mean, I'm being very candid when I say that. In aviation, it's first to market with the best idea, with the right team, and George showed you our team earlier. And it would take, in my estimation, having been in the industry a long time, for people to catch up with us. And we used to, at Cessna, as a matter of fact, as a technique, invite people in and invite our competition in and let them see what we were doing, because if they looked at that and they froze that in time, we were already 3 years down the road on a new product, and that's what we're going to be doing with this. And first to market is very, very critical, and then being in the marketplace with the most reliable, most well-backed product. But it's an extremely difficult question, because the first thing an investor always wants to know with us is how are we going to protect the IP? How are we going to get the patents? And basically, an airplane, I can sit down and design one and park it and patent 100% of that airplane, and all you have to do is change a little tiny piece or part on it, and you can charge right ahead. So it's really being, it's having the right team put together, having the right intellectual people working on it, the right engineers, and being first to market with it, and then nobody can catch you. And there will be other people. I mean, it's just like the start of aviation, and I'll get off on a tangent here, but Wichita, Clyde Cessna, Lloyd Stearman, Walter Beach, all started different airplane companies in Wichita, Kansas, and there were 4 different engineers that went off in 4 different directions. And I'm sure there are other people that are looking at electric the same way, but we just feel that time to market and our team is our advantage.
I'm Larry Knauer. I'm a director of aerospace engineering at Lockheed Martin. I was president of Pratt & Whitney Space Propulsion for a number of years. So I've been involved in this industry a long time, and I've struggled with our incremental approach, 1% at a time. I've spent 30 years getting 1% more out of a rocket engine. Seems ridiculous, but that's what we've done. I like what you're doing. Great concept, great idea, great approach. How do we, I'm aware of several dozen patents, that things that are out there that can enhance these kinds of technologies, but the momentum to get them moving and over the hurdle. How do we break the logjam that exists today in getting beyond demonstrated capability and getting into flight equipment? How do we get over that hurdle?
Real simple answer. If you know somebody that has the technology, call us. We would be very happy to work out a business arrangement and take advantage of their patent. I mean, and that's a very, very open, honest answer. If there's technology out there, batteries are a great example. You know, we talked about batteries earlier. There are pieces of technology on the airplane that probably are patented. And again, Cessna example, there are a lot of things that we put on that we bought from our suppliers and partners that were patented. So my very simplistic answer is that we would like to know when that technology is out there, and we would like to talk to people about potential partnerships and participation with us on the airplane.
We've had tremendous new designs from a genius, at least I think, Burt Rutan and Dick, but Burt Rutan, has he really patented any of his stuff? He did. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head. You know, scale composites and what Burt and Dick have done out in Montrose and out in California, they have patented some of the things that they've done. But there again, to your point earlier, they are not giving quantum leaps forward in technology. That's part of the situation. What we're doing is we're doing a game changer in some of the airplanes that some of the people are working about right now. And I use Williams as an example. When they came on with the small gas turbines, they actually increased efficiency of those engines by anywhere from 25 to 40%. And that they weren't 1% increments, and they weren't 5%, they were 40% increments. And the new generation of, and I'm not a Cessna advertisement, but a lot of the Cessna new jets are based on that engine technology, where those airplanes are flying around now at higher speeds with half the fuel burn. So it's just a matter of marrying the people with the technology with the people who are building the airplanes.
I think one of the things that especially the younger people need to remember, I mean, if you write an app for an iPhone, you only have to get past Apple. If you're going to do what they're trying to do, you're going to repower an airplane, essentially change the way we fly. That takes an enormous amount of people skill, because you're not just going first to market. You have to go through the FAA to become first to market. And the skill it takes to go through the FAA is a very specific skill set that very few people have. The patience, the drive. You have to be addicted or possessed, really, to take something through the FAA that they've never seen before, because you're going... Yeah, didn't I? But that's the only kind of person who can do it. My attention span is so short, I can't remember what I did on Saturday. I am never going to get through Oklahoma City. So the kind of person that can do that is very unique, and it's that gateway that makes aviation success so valuable. I mean, if you're the person that carried it through, that's where the intellectual property lies, and that's the value of, you know, a patent or an STC or a TSO, is the skill that you get, you know, that can take it from one place to another.
And definitely experience. And that's where that comes from.
What I wanted to say is that this change, and I so much agree with you, that one of the biggest things is change. We have great new developments already there, but watching that man who I've been married to a long time, he picked me up in college in an airplane. He always changes, every car he has, he takes out a flathead and puts in a Corvette engine. Everything is power, everything is big engines. And for him, when he talked about going with this project, I went, oh yeah, this is going to be short-lived. It will never happen. And he comes back more and more enthused. And I think the way things are now with our economy, with so many people are opening up, the blinders aren't on. I mean, he was a F-105 pilot and he loved going, what, 2.5 times the speed of sound? If you can do the technology that still has that power, only quietly, but I think so many people are frightened of the change. But when he changes, a lot of people are going to change because he's as stubborn as they get.
Hi, I have three questions that are interrelated. One is, what is your projected price point for the conversion kit? Two, are you going to license the technology, or are you going to do the conversions yourself? And three, what's the insurmountable barrier that you see right now to delivery?
Well, I guess the first question had to do with the price point, and we did speak to that a little bit earlier. While it's not yet determined with precision, because of course we're looking ahead 2 to 3 to 5 years, we project it to be equal to or less than the conventional system in the airplane today, the internal combustion Lycoming or Continental engine that's in the airplane today. Less expensive directly, less expensive to retrofit. The second question again, remind me? Licensing. As Charlie points out, and as you saw up on the slide there, one of the great barriers to the competition is that we pretty much invited everybody to the party. I mean, everybody's up there. Most of the major competition is potentially on that Strategic Advisory Council. We will be as participatory as we possibly can. Our aim is to change an industry, not a company. So to the extent we can apply progressively our technology to the broadest possible audience, that's our aim. Now, within that, of course, we're a business and we have to proceed appropriately, of course, step by step. But in the end, yes, I think there'll be collaborators, there'll be licenses, and probably kind of a portfolio of engagement with various entities. And the third part of your question? No, again, I think the technology is emerging, evolving. We're going to see greater and greater opportunity for, call it an increase in eloquence. But even today, the technology that exists today, with the great engineering team that we have, we've seen appropriate adaptation of that technology that's available today on the Prius, the Leaf, and the Ford, and et cetera, correctly engineered, we believe, as we prepare for this proof of concept, stage 1, flight in the next 5-6 months or so, and then stage 2, it appears that we have the correct approach with safety. In the initial meetings with the FAA, we're being very careful to stage what we're doing with certification in mind, ultimately, of course, serving general aviation and the pilot owner customer.
And we're about out of time, but I want to use the moderator's prerogative and ask you one more question. And I want to put on my Tom Fry hat, okay? Now, when you're changing technology, you're going in this trying to change a system, but do you think that you're going to be creating a market for people who maybe weren't even interested in flying an airplane before, changing the way they use airplanes, the way they perceive aviation compared to other modes of travel?
I think that's a rhetorical question.
Somewhat. Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to envision what,
Yeah.
more people having access to aviation. Right?
Here we all are, and over a little bit to the west is the next generation in school. Over here, my daughter.
Your flight now.
There you go. Yeah. We have to imagine, of course, the greatest potential benefit and good to today's generation, and of course we look to the future for tomorrow's generation. And what's our culture, what's our society, what's our experience going to be 10 or 20 years from now? And I believe truly, passionately, we're preparing the next generation's experience in aviation. And yes, I truly believe if we get the cost of the entry into aviation, this training and pilot experience will be significantly broader based tomorrow than it is today with such a great expense. And then of course the technology aspect, there's a coolness. I mean, it's cool. And if we introduce back to the experience, kind of as I was talking about, the adventure, the excitement of aviation that we had 30, 40, 50 years ago, and we introduce that to the next generation coming in, I think it'll be neat. I mean, there'll be a desire to have that experience that we all have enjoyed, and I think much more broadly enjoyed with the future.
Charlie, can you add to that? Thank you, George.
I can only underscore what George said, and I've had a lot of very interesting conversations that have acknowledged, and I don't do this. I thought I turned this thing off before I came in. Anybody? I've got a bunch of old cars for sale, so it's probably somebody tried to give me money. But no, we have really had a lot of very strong input from people about how this is capturing a lot of young minds. And I think it will bring a new generation into aviation when we show green, we show the technology, and we show the capability that we have. So it bodes well for the future.
Thank you. Let's have a great round of applause.